Hello, this is Kim Kerr. I'm here to talk to you about my research, which is essential criteria for project selection using decision theory. The agenda for this presentation is laid out here. So really we're going to talk about the project, the research, go through that and the various elements within the research and provide more information on that. So when I talk about the research problem and purpose statement, what I'm focusing on as an organization is looking at how to develop a framework or tool that organization could implement and help it to integrate throughout the organization, so across the organization, on helping them make decision or do their decision making on initiatives or projects, and that will, one, enhance the organization's performance while achieving its strategic goals and minimizing risk. And in this particular case, this study is focused on Yuba Water Agency, which is an organization in California, and where the goal is to identify that critical criteria for project selection. So this is pre-project implementation. It's at that selection phase. Where do we put our resources? Is this the right project? Have we made the right decision on a solution for whatever problem we're trying to address? And we're going to do that through the lens of decision-making theory and with the goal to reduce risk and enhance organizational performance. The research questions really are focused in primarily this is it's a exploratory sequential research, mixed methods research, and we're going to do the qualitative. There's three research questions there with the quantitative research focused on one. And the goal is to identify gaps and discrepancies in the current processes. So that's what research question one focuses on. Two is the research question is really looking at how by going through this analysis, this research, can we help Yuba Water improve its project selection? And the third one is really looking at it from a perspective of the various participants in the research based off of their position in the organization, business unit, and employment within the agency. So it's their perception based off of that criteria. This is an organization that's growing substantially in the last 5 years. So they've basically doubled their employee population. So a lot of new employees, a lot of folks have been around for a long time. What are the different perceptions of those employees based off of their length of service, their business unit and position? Once we gather that information, then on the quantitative phase, what we're looking at is we will have identified the key criteria, and then we'll use that in the quantitative phase for the employees to rank. And that'll be based off of who should be included in that project, what's the key criteria that they believe is important to making the proper selection of a project and to make it successful. When we look at the design, as I've indicated, we've got the qualitative and a quantitative, and it's sequential, so it's not simultaneous. So in phase one, or excuse me, the qualitative phase, we have three different phases. The first one is looking at an artifact review, looking at all the documents and the current processes, prior projects of the organization. And what we're looking at there as well is gathering that and identifying gaps and discrepancies. From there, that generates and asks questions of the employees on a qualitative survey that will go out to all employees. That will come back. Then through that, we'll identify those themes, bounce that off of the artifact review. So we'll do some analysis there. And then from there, again, developing critical criteria that have been identified through this two tools so far. That will then be taken to employees in Yuba Water Agency that are the managers within the different departments. So it could be 5 to 6 individuals. And what we'll use them for is to help validate that information and inform the process and ensure that we've identified the critical criteria, have their input on that. Do we have it right? Do we have the right gaps and discrepancies? Do we have the right policy documented? So that will come out of the semi-structured interviews. Once we've gathered that, we'll do that analysis and analysis again of those three data points, bring that together, refine the critical criteria, and be able to then take and develop the critical criteria survey and through the lens of decision theory, that will go out into a survey for the ranking by the employees on the last phase, which is, or the last element in the qualitative survey process. So that's the concept that we have at this point for the research project. On the data collection, there's really permission is going to be a key. And so prior to getting started with this, permission will be needed to engage with Yuba Water Agency to, one, use them as the site, research site, and then be able to access their documents and their employees. And we'll need to work with them to gather the email addresses for the employees to send out surveys, plus identify those managers. So we'll have to have permissions from them to do that in each phase: artifact review, the surveys, and the semi-structured interviews. We'll also have to go to Franklin University Institutional Review Board, because we are dealing with surveying individuals. That information will have to get permission from them and get approval. We'll end up having consent forms and all of those elements done prior to initiating this research. And so when we do that, what we'll look at as we go through, we'll be doing the phases is the qualitative data selection. We'll do that analysis. We'll integrate the qualitative into the quantitative phase. And then out of that will become the quantitative data analysis, which is developing that critical criteria that will go in for that final survey and to seek the employee's contribution in ranking that. So this is a chart that kind of lays out that process through the research questions and works through that. When we look at the population, I've kind of talked about this a little bit already. We're talking about the artifact review. It's just the artifacts based off, and there's a list of documents that have been initially identified, but there may be, as a result of that review, generate more documents, as well as through the semi-structured interviews and potentially through the qualitative survey. And the qualitative surveys, again, all employees will self-select whether or not they want to participate. This organization has had a pretty high response rate to surveys as long as you're really working with them. Some of those have been over 70%. I'm hopeful that we can get 30% response rate. That would be great to do that. One of the things, because it's self-selected, is we want to be able to triangulate this information. And so by adding in the semi-structured interviews, we're hoping to do that and to help validate the information by department and ensure that we've captured the correct process and that we've got each of those elements captured and are responsive to what the organization is currently doing. When we get into the quantitative population, that's again all employees. That final survey will go out for all employees to rank. They may be the same people who responded the first time. We may see some additional people because it's just a ranking. So again, if we can get over 30%, that would be the goal. I would love to have a higher percentage. The sampling plan, because it is self-selection, is a voluntary response by Yuba Water employees for the qualitative and the quantitative surveys, and it's purposeful for the semi-structured interviews. One of the things I look at here is that there's some ethical concerns that need to be addressed. I have a relationship with Yuba Water Agency, so I need to ensure that I call that out, that I'm not I'm following the research and not somebody's particular perspective of what needs to be done. So really being clear and concise is that it's based off of the data gathered through this process and trying to validate and ensure that that's aligned, the information that's gathered through the surveys and the semi-structured interviews is valid and validated through different elements. So through the triangulation of using the semi-structured interviews, the artifact review, as well as the qualitative research survey, which will then feed into the quantitative survey that will help to validate, and it's not one touch point, it's really looking at 4 different touch points and being able to do that. And again, it's ensuring that we protect the individuals that are participating from a confidentiality perspective. The data is secured appropriately, is confidential, as well as ensuring that we can make sure that all responses are anonymous and de-identify anybody from the semi-structured interviews, and really try to be as broad in that and not narrow, saying that, oh, the purchasing department says this, but trying to address that and make sure that we're, again, unbiased, not coming from my perspective. And I have based off of that research, or excuse my relationship, I need to ensure that there's validity and that we don't have any threats to that. So researcher bias is a big issue, both from a perspective of having a relationship, but also as having experience in working in local government in the state of California, that I don't bring in my own perceptions, but it's really truly based off of the organization's needs, what they're currently today doing and where they should go in the future, based off of the input from employees. And I need to triangulate. It's going to be a key element here. And that's what my project is on, and I'll be happy to take any questions.